welcome to Steve Marriott Coaching. Now in this video we're going to talk a little bit more about neurodynamics of teams and how you can use those neurodynamics to enable your team to raise the bar on their performance and become more efficient and more effective in the way that they work together. Now in my previous video when we introduced neurodynamics, we talked about three aspects that our brains are monitoring other people for in order to gauge how effectively they can work together. And those three elements were drive, competence and values. Drive being the energy and motivation that we bring towards a project and working together. Competency and contribution, not necessarily the technical skills, but the human skills that will bring us together and enable us to work effectively together. And shared values, those under the hood principles that guide our every thought, decision and action. Now in this video I want to share with you some of the tools, the ideas, the strategies that I've used successfully with other teams to help them work more effectively together and ultimately to raise their performance. So my first piece of advice is this: don't copy. This is not a best practice exercise because this isn't prescriptive. We know that every single team is built up of unique individuals. So what works for one team is not necessarily going to work for every other. Whilst we might hold those other teams in high regard, what works for them works only for them. So there's very little to be gained by doing a best practice and copying and emulating what they do. At best, what you'll get is a karaoke version of what works for another really successful team, which probably leaves you feeling a little bit hollow and a little bit insignificant because you don't quite reach the same success factors that they do. So what is it what we can do? Well, there's some simple principles that you can use that will enable you to find your unique version of what those other teams are doing. And it all revolves around conversations. So 3 conversations that you need to have with your team, because what we want to do is we want to gauge everybody's thoughts and everybody's perceptions so that we can find what works generally for all of us. So rather than being prescriptive and forcing it on people, let's engage them to open up about what's important and what works for them, and we'll find what uniquely works for our own team. So the first conversation we need to have is around the 3 aspects of neurodynamics. So we need to talk to each other about drive. What's the ideal level of energy and motivation that works for our team? Because it's important that we have a similar level of energy, because what I've noticed in teams is when teams are working with an individual who's got a much greater level of energy and motivation and drive, it can make those people who are at a lower level feel insignificant or feel as if they're dragging their heels. So they feel a little bit left out and they feel a little bit intimidated. Similarly, on the other side, if we're working with people with lower levels of energy than ourselves, then it can feel like we're pulling more than our fair share, and it creates a level of inequity and disparity. So we need to find what we call a Goldilocks level, that level of energy that's neither too much nor too little. It's just right for us in our context. The next thing, we want to talk about competency and contribution. Now for me, this is the critical factor for performance, or rather underperformance. You see, technical skills matter because without those technical skills, nothing's going to get done. But what we tend to do is over-index on technical skill at the expense of the human skills, about how we deploy those skills. What we need to do is have a conversation about what the human skills are that we want and how we would need to show up for each other in our work. Because we're all different and all unique, what we will have is a different perspective on our own version of how. And what we clumsily do as managers is we tend to think that if we just define a specific behaviour, everybody will understand that and they will deliver it. Now, more often than not, when I meet underperformance, it's simply that the hows haven't been defined and they haven't been explained. So what we need to do is we need to ask our team, what are the human skills that are important to us that will what are the skills, what are the capabilities, what are the human qualities that will complement the team that we have and the work that we do, or enhance the team that we have and the work that we do. We need to get them on the table and we need to work out exactly what those look, sound, smell and feel like in our own dynamic. The third aspect is values. This is critical to cohesion, and when I find teams falling apart over little matters, it's generally down to a disharmony or a conflict of values. So what do I mean by values? I don't mean the values that you see on business posters around on walls. I'm talking about the real personal values that people have spent a lifetime living to. What we need to do is put them on the table and find the one, two, or three that we all kind of align behind that will give us our true north, because that's what we will come back to when things get tough. It will allow us that in times of adversity or times of uncertainty, it will allow everyone to remain focused, aligned, and committed to the cause. So that's the first conversation that we need to have. The second conversation is about looking at ourselves. How do we live up to this standard? Now we've defined it. It's the first time we've actually had that conversation. So it would be expectable to have people who are ahead of the curve, and there will be people who are behind the curve. So having that conversation about what actions do we need to take individually and collectively to get closer to our own ideal is the next step. And the final conversation that we need to have is about looking to the future. Now that we've defined our principles, now that we've gotten ourselves closer to our standard, how do we use that to attract, to recruit, and to integrate new talent into our team? Because people will leave and we will need to bring in other people. What are the things that we need to do or to be cognizant of to make sure that we're bringing in the best people to help and support and help the team grow? So, begin those conversations, first about the three aspects, then think about how you measure up, and then think about how you would then bring that and use it to attract other people to join you. Now, if you're interested in raising performance of your team by enabling and engaging a little bit more mind-aligned approach, then use these details to get in touch with me, and let's talk about how I can come and help you to raise the bar of performance in your team. As usual, if you know anybody would value or would really benefit from this video, then please share it with them. Click on like, and as usual, subscribe, and I'll keep these videos coming so long as you find them useful. I'll see you in the next video.